All right, welcome. We are live at the Dads Who Lead podcast with Ned Schaunt. Ned is a TEDx speaker. He is the host of the Craft of Fatherhood podcast. He has a new book coming out called The Adventure of Fatherhood, and he has done a lot of very beautiful and deep work in this space. And it is an honor to have him on today to take a dive. Ned, welcome on.
Right on, bro. Thanks so much for having me.
Absolutely. So I guess my first question, and I don't know if this is the deepest way to start, but it's a place to start. And that is you were asked to do a TEDx talk on fatherhood. What was the process behind who asked you to do that, and why did they feel you were qualified to drop in and share your story?
Yeah, great question. So actually, a friend of mine, Dwight, had said that there was a TEDx going to be in our town and that they were taking applications and that I should do it. And so me and 300 other people submitted applications, and they took 10 of them.
Wow.
And the basically, they had a bunch of questions around a hero's journey. And so I had to apply in a sense, and so I wrote that fatherhood can change the world and the hero's journey of the father. So that was how it happened. And then I was super stoked to get that email saying you're in. And then because of COVID, it actually got delayed an entire year, which really was great. Because it gave me some more time. So I mean, I could talk about the preparation of that, but yeah.
Right on. And your theme and your TEDx talk is rebel and create. And just maybe share with listeners about what that looks like and how you transferred some of who you were into your journey of fatherhood.
Yeah, so I wrote a book called Rebel and Create, and I put that out in 2019. It's just self-published. It's on my website, rebelandcreate.com. And really, this was just my mantra, my self-discovery of learning what mattered most as a man. So, I grew up believing that my purpose in life was to run a youth center. And it was at my fingertips in 2015. Long story short, fell apart, didn't happen. And so I had a real identity crisis. And through that process, this mantra, rebel and create, came to me. I don't really remember how or when, but a lot of self-discovery and just realizing like I needed to rebel against this idea that my fulfillment as a man was going to come from something I did out in the world. And that really, based on my beliefs about how I was designed as a man, primarily this need for love, respect, value, fulfillment, to leave a mark on this earth, that was really going to come from me embracing being a father in my home, which being a father in my home means being a husband, being a dad, being a leader, providing, protecting. And so that's where rebel and create came from. And it's just my mantra towards life. And it can be applied to anything. Like I rebel against having cell phones at the dinner table so that we can create amazing family conversations. Does it work every time? Do we sit around and kumbaya every single dinner? No, we're a family of 7. Obviously, life is life and kids are kids. So that's rebel and create. That's what it means.
Beautiful, man. And you're a father of 5. You've got, is it 3 daughters and 2 sons?
4 daughters and 1 son.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow. And how old in your TED talk you share it, so I encourage everybody to go check out the TED talk, but you became a father at 22.
Yeah.
And in the moments and leading up, I recall I became a father young as well. I was 18. What was the journey for you like, stepping into knowing you were going to become a father? And it seems like you're really strong. You are very strong in your faith. How did it influence the direction that the Lord was calling you?
Yeah. So, I mean, even as a kid, there were times like I wanted to be a pediatrician. I just always loved kids. So I knew I wanted to have a family. However, I thought I'd have two boys because I had a brother growing up. So you just kind of imagine your life being the same. And then I didn't really want to have kids until I turned 25. But on our 1 year wedding anniversary, or pretty dang close, a week before, my wife hands me this like little gift box, and it was on my birthday, and I'm like, okay, cool, she got me something. And I opened it up, and it was a thermometer. I'm like, what the hell is this? Why is she giving me a thermometer? It wasn't a thermometer. I was 22 years old. It was a pregnancy test, so I had no idea what I'm looking at. And then I was like, wow, we're having a kid. So I wouldn't even say that I was super psyched when I found out, because I'm a planner, and when the plan changes, it takes me a little bit of time. So it took me a little bit of time, but as soon as my wife was like, well, as soon as I got over it, I was so excited. I absolutely adore my wife being pregnant. I wish we had 10 kids. But just, five is already a lot. But as soon as I got through kind of the initial shock that this is happening sooner, I just totally embraced. I was excited and ready to be a dad.
Nice.
I wouldn't say ready. I was excited.
Nice. That journey is really powerful, and it seems like your desire to connect with kids is now transformed into desire to help kids through helping dads in their fatherhood. Your first book, you touched on it briefly. Remind me the name of it, and was it the Rebel and Create? Was that your first?
Yeah, Rebel and Create. Mm-hmm.
What year? And you said it was published in 2019. What could readers expect from that experience if they pick that up?
Yeah, I mean, really, it's just me talking about my discovery that life is a journey, that as a man, you want fulfillment, and that those things come from these incredible waves in your life: your marriage, your relationship with your kids, your relationship with the world, your relationship with other men. So really, it's kind of like a manifesto of my discovery. And, the reason why I even wrote it is I was looking around one day and like looking at dudes thinking we live in a culture where it's like, do what you love, which to some level I agree with. But my day-to-day job is selling insurance. That's not sexy to me at all. And so if my identity is wrapped up in, I just sell insurance, then I'm going to be dissatisfied. And so I looked at, the world has to go around. We need truck drivers, we need managers, we need people who do telecommunication, like name all these jobs that would maybe be considered unsexy. And so I put the book out to go, hey, I found fulfillment in showing up as a dad, and I think you can too. And that's really the culmination of my TEDx, right? So all the stuff that I'm doing is kind of a progression. So if you watch the TEDx, you basically get the 15-minute version of my book, but even more refined, because I put in a calculated 120 hours into my TEDx. And that's from like sitting behind my computer, not daydreaming about it in the shower.
Yeah.
And so I was able to really narrow down what are my beliefs around fatherhood? What does it matter? And it's all about identity. That's really what I'm talking about here, is identity, not parenting.
This is really deep. Our identity as fathers and how we've been conditioned through media, through our parents, through the culture that we've been in, our relationships. How have you weathered that storm of really being clear on how you want to identify and create yourself as a father and differentiate yourself from the noise?
Well, I mean, obviously I'm trying to not be Homer Simpson, right? I'm trying to be engaged. And I think that on one level, you have to realize how dangerous you are. You have to realize how much power you have. Statistically, we could say, oh yeah, this many people in prison didn't have dads. And so statistics show, how important a father is, but yet our day-to-day actions of encouraging dads to show up isn't a reflection of the negative that happens when a dad's not around. And so I think it's just for me a daily reminder, through really tracking my time and my energy and where I'm spending it, to ensure that I'm showing up as a dad, I'm showing up as a husband, I'm being a great role model, I'm learning and growing in myself. But I also, have to balance, am I putting too much effort into making a book or talking about fatherhood and not actually living it? So it's like, I just did a Kickstarter for my kids' book coming. I was on Instagram every day for 30 days, just grinding it out. And then I haven't been on, I think I've done one post since the 4th of July. So, and it's like, I want to be a quote unquote influencer, I guess, but I'm more interested in being a great dad to my kids. And so there's kind of this balance of like, I'll show up for this social world that may or may not care. But ultimately, if I'm not living my, 1,000-year plan, which is showing up for my kids today, then it's all a bunch of crap and waste of time.
Absolutely. That's leading by example for everyone else as well.
For sure. And I think that's really where the real work is done, right? Is not, I got 100 messages or 1,000 messages on Instagram about how great whatever was, but maybe I get a message from a neighbor or a friend or somebody a few times a year, like, hey, I'm struggling with my marriage, or hey, I had some parenting things. And then I'm doing the same thing, asking other people that I'm paying attention to. So I think really there's a ton of really great dudes out there. There's a ton, and we can all learn from each other. We all have something to say. And if we're all showing up for our families well, then collectively we are making a huge impact.
Yeah. What's your, obviously a big part of me and my leadership as a dad, my style, like just like martial artists have different styles, I feel fatherhood has different styles, and you evolve your style to fit you and you fit your kids. With your style, how do you like to balance taking care of yourself with spending time with your kids, and like that your self-care routine, and leading them by example of how to take care and govern their own lives?
I try to include them as much as I can. Sometimes I do a good job, sometimes I don't. My morning routine is really critical to me. I don't nail it every time, but that's like my self-care time. Working out is really important to me, but I work out probably 7 times a week. And I'd say half of those, one of my kids is with me. We're doing it together. Um, and then if I think about my style as a dad, I think that I go back and forth between playfulness and just like, let's just wrestle and have fun, and then being intentional. We're journaling before bed, or we're doing a family devotion together. Um, so I think that there's kind of two styles that I fall into depending on what's important for the kids right now.
Cool. You have several, like you mentioned, you have 4 daughters and a son, and with a bigger family, I'm always curious with dads, because I've got 3 kids, dads that have a larger family. How do you manage all the relationships within each kid, between the different kids, and making sure that you are touching base and checking in on each of them in their own growth and journey?
Yeah, man, it's hard. I'll tell you that I'm not as consistent as I would like to be, but a couple things that I do now, I'll tell you what I do, but then it's going to be like, it's sporadic sometimes, because I think that's just the reality of life. So one thing I do is I have a daily dashboard. So every day at the end of the day, I put in my dashboard, and I have different segments of this, but there's a section on family. There's a section on marriage. And so I'm putting down, like, I spent an hour with Presley yesterday. I spent an hour with Brody. Me and Violet went and played soccer. So I'm actually putting the time in it. And then the ideal is once a month I look at this. Sometimes it's every 2 months, sometimes it's every 3 months, sometimes I miss a whole week of data. But I'm able to look back and go like, oh my gosh, I say I'm an incredible husband, but I took my wife on 2 dates in the last 90 days.
Wow.
Right. Or looks like I've been spending a lot of time with Brody because it's easy to go surf with him, and I haven't done a lot with Stella. So like, that's a practical way that I am tracking it to go, am I spending time with my kids? Like, am I actually? And then now that we're back in the rhythm of school, we do have a morning huddle together as a family, and we check in, what's your intention for the day, which is, your intention is more like, how do I need to show up? And then what's your one thing for the day? So what's the most important thing to you? And then we do a family meeting once a week. Again, that once a week could sometimes be every other week or once a month, or we go all summer and only meet a couple times. But there we ask, hey, what are your dreams? What are you working on? What matters to you? And then lastly, I just started this. So ask me in 6 months if I'm doing this, but I was feeling like, man, I don't really, I want to check in with them individually, not just with the family meeting. So like Sunday night, I was like just sitting in my bed and I had each one come into my, sorry, I'm going to move my screen for a second and grab my journal. Ugh.
Cool.
Have each one come into my room and I asked them like a set of questions. Like, hey, what's important to you? What's worrying you right now? What are you excited about? What's your goal for the week? Is there anything that any of your siblings has been doing that's bothering you? Is there any reconciliation needed? And it turned out to be cool. I spent like 5 to 10 minutes with each kid and got a few to-do items from that. So again, if you're listening, you're like, oh my gosh, this guy does a lot. It's sporadic. It's not, and I don't think that that's bad. I think that if you are intentionally trying to show up for your kids, it's going to look different in different seasons of life. But at the end of the day, it comes down to being present with them when they are talking to you.
Being present is huge. And it's easy to be distracted with everything that we have in this world. And I even find it for myself, if I've spent a lot of time maybe on social media and then I'm trying to wind down in the evening, trying to focus and organize thoughts on one thing, I can
Yeah.
feel the difference in the days that I have and the days that I haven't. So we compound that, and with a younger mind that's still developing, having that expectation or routine that offers that space could be an absolutely huge advantage.
Yeah. I mean, it's really hard to be present. So, I mean, that's something that you have to be very intentional about. And it's a practice of being present. And there's days where I'm like, gosh, dang it. Why am I not just super stoked to just be here right now? And so I think it's like, what are the questions you're asking yourself? What are the triggers that are throwing you off? And then what do you do when that happens? Like, how are you shifting your mood? Like, you're the only one in control of that. And it's not easy. It's simple process, but it's not easy to do. But at the end of the day, you're the only one who can do it. And I like myself a whole heck of a lot more when I'm present, you know, but sometimes there'll be times where my 14-year-old's talking to me and I'm like telling myself, hey dude, she's talking to you and this matters. Pay attention what she's saying. Don't just think about how you want to respond or where you guys are headed or whatever. So yeah, it's critical.
That's cool. You mentioned one of the ways that you stay present is going surfing with your son. And I imagine being out there in Hawaii, there are a lot of other adventures that you like to do with your kids. How has that elevated your experience as a dad, casting into adventure with your family?
You know what, man? I think it's easy to say, and this isn't a cut on what you just said, but it's easy to say, oh, you live in Hawaii, there's a ton to do, right? I remember we grew up in a tiny little town in Northern California, and my dad would take my brother and I to the lake when it was raining, and there'd all be all these little, little rivers running in, and we would build dams together. And so I think that as a dad, it doesn't freaking matter at all where you live. You don't even have to have a plan. Like half of the, movies we love, the Goonies or, Hook or these like adventure things is like just you went outside or Sandlot or whatever. Like you went outside and then something just happened. Some days are going to be a flop, but most days something will happen. So with my own kids, especially when they were little, if it's pouring down rain, it's like, let's go outside. Let's go take a walk in the rain. And I think cultivating that from when they're little, it just go outside, go find leaves, go find acorns, go to a stream, go build a dam. It doesn't matter what you do. I think getting outside with your kids is critical because it requires you or gives you the space to be present with them.
Absolutely. And for me as a dad, and I have seen it with other dads as well, is when you take the initiative to set up the plan and you go to the creek or you go surfing or you go to the park and throw the football, there's an intention there, and it's a very subtle, it's a subtle tactic, but it's a way that you're showing up and showing your kids that you care without saying I care. I care about
Yeah.
you. I love you. Not that it's not important to tell them words of affirmation that you love them every day, and for you, especially our kids that are really action oriented, having that time together
Yeah.
and having them have the opportunity and trust to lean into your leadership and guidance out in the world can make a huge difference.
Yep. Yes, totally. And I think that sometimes you are going to have kids a lot of times, nah, dad, I don't want to go. And you could get burnt as a dad saying, oh, fine, forget it. A lot of times they're going to say no, just take them anyways. Once you're 10, 15 minutes out of the house, then they're stoked, but they're not always going to want to go. And I think don't take it personal. Just do what you know you need to do, spend the time, it'll work itself out. I mean, that happens all the time with my kids.
And this is diving in. I know you're adventurous, and I could see you just with a little kid on your arm or on your back. How old were your kids when you started taking them out into the wilderness?
I mean, as soon as we could go in a stroller, I mean,
Yeah.
3 months, 4 or 5 months. I mean, they're outside. We're just even walking around outside with my kid. But I mean, that's even just go walk around the block, just go outside, just go lay out and look at the stars. Yeah. I mean, take them outside immediately.
I brought that up. I've talked to several dads who have been like, well, I'll be adventurous when they're older.
Yeah.
And the sooner they start to get acclimated to it, it doesn't seem like much when they're 3 months old and they're out walking around, in the rain, or you're carrying them. But then if that's acclimated when they're 6, 12, 18, 18 months, 3 years, they're ready to go. They're excited. They're not scared of it. And it's a really beautiful thing to see as kids develop, just seeing them be kids
Yeah.
outside and getting in touch with that side of them.
Yeah, you're creating a habit with them when they're young. I think sometimes you just got to let mom know, hey, I'm their dad. It's okay. They'll be okay, and not just be like a passive. And it doesn't happen all the time, but sometimes I see it where a dad just feels crippled to be able to do that. They don't feel like they have what it takes, or that the kid just needs mom. And that's just not the case. Kid needs dad too.
I want to drop in. I have a concept that I'm working on, an article we're writing, of the balance of a safety freedom continuum. And I was a teacher for 7 years, and I've seen an increase in the emphasis on safety for kids. And often, like, I'm grown up, safety is like, all right, especially when I was teaching PE, like safety, we wear a bike helmet, we wear a rope when we climb the rock wall. There are things that allow us to mobilize and actually do more in the long run. Now, as I see things continue and conversations to get more sterilized, often safety means avoiding hard conversations or
Mm,
avoiding tasks that can be potentially dangerous completely. And it's slowly getting more and more normal to stay home, stay safe. And maybe you can touch on the balance that you've seen, or if you've talked to dads that may be grappling with their spouse over, the balance between growth and being uncomfortable. And I think that was a theme on a recent podcast that you had, being uncomfortable versus being safe, and the growth that can happen when we're stretching that boundary.
I mean, I think that's why a child is born to you with this need for you, right? They do need you to protect them. But as a father and a mother, my role, is to create opportunity for my child to get some scrapes and bruises in a somewhat safe environment, if you will. So it's like, I'm not going to let my 5-year-old probably use a kitchen knife, or 3-year-old use a kitchen knife, but maybe 8, 9, like my 9-year-old, the other day was cutting an apple with a knife, and me and my wife are both cringing a little bit. But if we just do it for her every time, then she's always going to rely on us to do everything for her. And I'm not raising a child, I'm raising an adult, right? Somebody
Mm.
who's going to be independent and self-sufficient. So there's these little things all the time that we could give our kids room to fail. Not, I mean, if she cuts herself with the knife, it's going to suck. It's potential for stitches or whatever, but it's in a safe enough environment where she can learn this. So I think you know your kid best. I do think we cripple our kids, though. I think that our kids can do far more than we allow them to. I mean, look at a third world country where a 8-year-old is taking care of a baby for its entire, being a baby.
Yeah.
And here, I'm not going to let my 9-year-old use the kitchen knife because they might cut themselves. And look at what that's doing. Like, we have a lot of people who are living at home a long time. They're not independent, they're not critical thinkers, they're not able to go out into the world because they don't know how to fail. They don't know how to handle a situation where there are scrapes and bruises. We have a lot of victims walking around, and it's because it's those little moments when your kids need space to fail. That's why you have them. Like, they have you as a guide to be there when they fail, not protect them from failing.
Failure is absolutely a huge part of our growth, and I've seen it that the folks that are able to, and the kids who are able to deal with and manage failure the best, are also the ones that are going to be willing to be creative and be willing to take
Yeah.
risks.
Yeah. Yeah. And, I think at the end of the day, especially as a dad, one, you need to just be in tune with your kids, know them, know what they need, and then also have a voice in the parenting. Don't just let your wife pick and choose everything. She'll respect you a whole lot more if you have a voice. I'm not saying rule with an iron fist and be a jerk, but have a voice, be a part of the conversation, lovingly say, well, hang on, why don't we let them do this? Or what if we were to do it in this way? Create space if you need to, but be part of the conversation.
I love that. And like dovetailing off of that, this is something I've talked to a lot of dads who have struggled with. And that is when they get into these conversations with their wives or their partners, maybe sometimes it's they're no longer with their mother of their son or their
Yeah.
daughter, and they want to see their kids take risks. Or maybe it's, I recall, so my son Charles, when he was 3 years old, wasn't with his mom, and I wanted to take him to a monster truck show. And that is actually now our earliest memory together, was this monster truck show. And there was this giant metal dragon that breathed fire and ate a car, and he just thought it was the coolest thing.
Yeah. Awesome.
And his mom was like, wow, it's too loud, it's not going to be. So we ended up getting like earplugs and earmuffs and made it work. But that's just an example
Mhm.
of dads who maybe want to take action. What skills or suggestions do you have to equip dads to have a meaningful, deeper conversation about their kids' development and stretching their boundaries?
Yeah, that's tough because you're getting in the dynamics of a marriage relationship or a divorce relationship or something like that. So, I mean, I think that there may it's a communication. So, are you working on your communication with the spouse, whether that's through reading and growing yourself, or carving out time that's not in frustration or anger to have conversations? Not it always being in the heat of the moment, right? And so I'll tell you, one of the things that's helped my wife and I is we do an annual, and sometimes it's semi-annual, take a day, and we have all these questions we go through. My friend Justin Donald had given them to me. Um, and we pause out of life and we ask, like, what's going on with this kid? What's going on with the friends we have? How do we like our daily routine? Like all these questions to go through, because it's outside of the normal realm of day-to-day life. So it helps a lot of these things come up communication wise that you may not bring up, which are important to you. I don't think that fully answers your question. So what I would say when it comes to you want to take action as a dad and maybe you feel like you can't, is you just have to keep showing up every day, keep fighting for it. If you can't do X, try Y. Start to build trust with your spouse or significant other that you're not a big freaking dope and that your kid needs you and that you're capable of going and doing stuff with your kid. If you haven't already cultivated that from when they're young, it's going to take some work. If your kid's 10 and you've never shown up to do stuff, it's probably not going to take 3 asks. It's probably going to take 2 years, right?
Yeah.
Of earning the respect and the right and the belief that you can do it. But you sure can. You just got to do it.
Yeah. And I love that because the more small adventures that you can go on, like my daughter's 2, or she just turned 3. We started taking her rock climbing gym when she was 2. And so that
Nice.
started to develop her like relationship with risk and growth. And my wife at first was really nervous about her climbing. And as she did it more, she realizes it's okay. So now if I'm doing something like taking her on a boat, she's not as worried because she knows that she's seen Maddie turn out okay.
Yeah.
We've been out doing things.
Yeah, that's a great example.
You've got a book coming out soon, The Adventure of Fatherhood, and it's a children's book. Can you touch a little bit on that and what called you into writing another book?
Yeah, love it. So, as the whole rebel and create thing kind of progressed, my whole thing is I want men just to look in the mirror and know who they are and then pursue being that father. So I did rebel and create, and then I created a journal for dads and we did a Kickstarter and it was cool. But dads aren't really wanting to sit and journal all the time. So it's not like it was a huge hit. Then we did the TEDx and we have the podcast. And we started sending gifts to new dads. So on our website right now, I think you can still buy them, but it's like a gift box for a dad. It doesn't have to be a new dad, but like, say you're having a baby, I wanted to create something that you could send a friend. So like, if you were having a kid, I could write a note, bro, welcome to fatherhood. You have what it takes. Super stoked for you. And you get this gift and you open it up and you're like, damn, Ned thought of me. This is awesome. So the thing is I was sending that out with a journal, and it's just like, if you're a new dad or have little kids, you don't even know what you don't know yet. You're not going to be sitting journaling, most likely, small percentage. So I was trying to think of something to put in there that helped the dad see who he was and just spark this excitement around his opportunity as a father. So I just went round and round, and I thought, what if I made a children's book that the dad could have to see who they are, and then as their child grows, they could read it to them. So I've probably been working on this for like 3 years or something like that.
Wow.
And now we did the Kickstarter this year. We fully funded it thanks to a bunch of people who pre-bought. We've sold like almost 700 copies already. You can go pre-order it at adventurefatherhood.com. And so that will be out probably February of 2023. And so what inspired it was a very simple, like, instead of me with my, fist under my chin on the cover of a book, 12 steps to being a great dad. I wanted something that was a very easy flip through and they go, whoa, this is me. I'm pretty important. And then the imagery is super rad. It's like vintage surf California. And the kid would love it. The kid would go, oh my gosh, we could build a treehouse together. Oh my gosh, you're going to teach me how to skateboard, like whatever. Right. So anyways, that book's coming out. I'm so excited about it. And then we're about 80% done with the father-daughter one, which I actually think I love even more. And that one will be out probably, it all depends, but Q3, Q4 of next year. And the intention is like, you could buy it just to give it as a gift. or read it to your kid, but you'll be able to order a gift box for a dad and welcome them into fatherhood. And there's kind of, I mean, I could talk more to why I think that's so important, but that's really what it was designed for.
Absolutely. Well, let's drop right into that question. As the author, why did you feel that this was such an important message you felt called to share?
Yeah, I mean, it goes back to what you and I talked about at the very beginning, the importance of fatherhood and for dads to know how important they are. So, as I see it, when you first become a dad, you hear the words you're going to be a dad. And it could be like, "Oh my gosh, this is exciting," or "Oh my gosh, I have no idea what to do." Either way, nobody's really inviting you into your role. We don't live in a village anymore where you're kind of seeing how this guy was a dad, this guy was a dad. We live a lot more independently. And I think that it's so much more obvious for a woman to have a rite of passage, right? I mean, she grows a human being in her body. She pushes this human being out of her own body, and then she feeds it. It's incredible. Moms are freaking incredible. But I think what happens is there's a very obvious rite of passage. And when baby comes, a lot of times, I think two things happen. One, mom decides if we're breastfeeding. Mom decides if we're using these kinds of diapers, this kind of food, this kind of formula, this kind of XYZ, this kind of preschool, kindergarten, education, right? So then the dad is like, when does the dad step in? When is he invited in to make this, to be a part of this? And so I want the book to help him go, dude, you are important. You are valuable. You are needed. Step into this. And then the other flip part to it too is mom gets a baby shower. Everyone's excited for the mom. And what happens for the dude? A lot of times their friends make a joke about, "Oh, your life's over. Oh, you can't hang out. Oh, you can't have sex for 6 weeks. Oh, you can't, like, here's a cigar. Here's a bottle of booze," which is great. Yeah. Give me a bottle of whiskey. I'd love it. But my point is, there isn't this, if I show up and you had your baby and I'm like, put my hand on your shoulder and I'm like, "Thomas, bro, dude, I'm so excited for you, man. You are going to be an incredible dad. So excited to watch." That's almost all we need as a man, is that validation of, I have what it takes. And a lot of times men aren't getting that. And my hope through this book is that that's an opportunity for a dude to invite another dude in without him handing you, like, he doesn't hand you a book that says 12 steps to be a great dad. I don't think a lot of dudes would do that. But a children's book, like, "Hey, I see you as this guy."
Yeah.
It's just such an easy, like, opportunity. And that's why I made it, is I'm not trying to be, the one-stop shop for everything dad wise. I just want dads to see who they are and then go on their own journey. So uh it's so important, man. Dads just need to be invited in. They got to know that kick-ass incredible dad is inside of them. It just needs to be awakened. The other thing too with it that I didn't mention is, I think because we are innately provider and protector, unfortunately, a lot of dudes just put their head down and go to work because that's naturally okay. We live in modern society. I guess I'll just go work more. But then we just get wrapped up in our work and we don't see the other aspects of our fatherhood role. As far as, like, in my TEDx, I talk about providing and protecting doesn't just mean knowing how to fight, being able to shoot a gun, and, buying us a nice house. I got to protect my daughter's hearts. I got to protect my son's mind. I mean, that's your role, and that's important. And so helping the father see that before his kid's 15 or before his kid's 30, that's my hope.
Beautiful. I love that. And I like that right, we can be both. Like, you can be a badass provider and
Totally.
come home and be an amazing nurturing father with a deep connection. It doesn't
Yes.
have to be both. It doesn't have to be one or the other.
Yep. Yep. Totally.
I see it often in the way as often we're labeled, right? Oh, it's stay-at-home dad. Oh, he's out working, and things can get if you feel like you're pigeonholed into one label or the other, and really what our kids need the most and what our wives need the most, or the mother of our children is for us to be great in all these domains. And it takes some of this deep work that you're dropping into and helping dads with, I believe, to get there.
Yes. Yes, we have to be growing. We have to be growing and working on ourselves. And there's so many rad ways to do that these days. I mean, that's why guys are listening to this right now, is they're being intentional about um, growth as a man, and the work you're doing for your kids and for your great, 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 great grandkids is
Mm.
going to be impacted from just you listening to this podcast right now. The fact that you are investing in yourself, the way you want to show up for your daughters, your son, your wife. Uh, Dude, this matters. Like, what else matters? This is what life is about, family.
Yeah, like when I look back on the memories of the years of, whether it's 2021, 2022, the ones that stand out the most are the ones that I've spent with my family, with my daughters and my son and my wife.
Mm-hmm.
And to know that, as this is the Dads Who Lead podcast, wrapping this all together, we need to be able to be leaders and setting a plan often to drop into adventure. It's been the masculine role to go out into the wilderness and go out and hunt and provide. And now as you continue to develop yourself, the funnest part about fatherhood is now your kids can learn, not by you telling them this is how you do A, B, and C, but by them watching you and being curious.
Yeah.
How do you use curiosity with your relationship with your kids?
Man, I would say that curiosity is so important to me. I feel like I'm a pretty curious person. My hope is to help my children to be curious as well. But I'm finding, I just had a deep conversation with my daughter where she was pretty frustrated with me, because I was talking to her about feeling those she's not very curious. She's the kid who could just go to school and just wants to be smarter than the other kids in class, which is fine because you're competitive, but you're not actually thinking for yourself. So I'm really like with her, I'm really trying to help her be curious. Like, what do you want to learn about? What matters to you? And she's almost like, I don't know, just tell me. Um, and so I think that curiosity is a big conversation. I want my kids to try lots of things so that they can get experiences to know what they like. And then ultimately, I'm trying to be curious about them so that I'm engaged with the people that they're becoming or whatever it is that matters to them. So, like, my one daughter loves to go to the gym. I don't like going to the gym. I like working out different ways. I go to the gym with her. My other daughter loves to play soccer. I never played soccer. We were at the field for an hour yesterday playing. So, as a dad, trying to be curious about what my kids are curious about, but carefully not hijacking it. So, like, here's an example. I hijacked it last night. I love if my daughter, my 16-year-old, breaks out her ukulele. And so last night, dude, so lame. Last night, I walk in the house, she's playing her ukulele on the couch. I go grab the djembe or the cajon and played with her for a minute, and it was all good. And then I grabbed my guitar, and then I heard her playing her ukulele in her room. And I went in there and I'm like, oh my gosh, I just freaking hijacked you being you. Like, you didn't need me to come play with you. I'm so sorry. I put my guitar away. If you want to come back out to the living room, I'd love to hear you, but zero pressure. So I think sometimes as a dad, we could also hijack our kids' stuff. And so giving them space to do their own thing is probably healthy too, like to show an interest in it, but not steal it. Because I think our kids are also looking for like their own things sometimes. And
Yeah.
maybe part of that's because we have 5 kids. So, they're like want a little independence from the family. But yeah, man, that was a screw up from last night. For
It's absolutely a dance. And,
sure.
I've spent a lot of time wrestling. And in wrestling, if you pull away too much, you're in trouble. If you push too much, you're in trouble. And I relate that a lot to parenting and fatherhood. because there's this finding this right spot where you get that connection and you get the interaction and the response that you're looking for. Where, you know, if you're too disinterested, they're gonna be like, well, whatever, dad. And if you're too much in it, then they're just gonna back away.
So yeah. Yes. Yes. And it's like giving them the space as well to figure out who they are. It's not going to be on your timing. I know sometimes I can want things to happen, but it's going to be their own timing.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, I want to wrap up with just a question about your relationship with your dad, which I haven't asked you about at all yet. So I have no idea how this is going to go. But what was your relationship with your dad, and how did it influence your journey into the path that you've become today as a leader?
So my dad and my mom are still married 40 years. My dad was very engaged and playful with my brother and I. Just going outside. He was a high school English teacher, so we'd go camping every summer. He had us outside every summer. But something that's really interesting right now, and I haven't talked about it, but when I was in 7th grade, my dad had brain surgery to the point where I thought he was going to die. I was told he was going to die, blah, blah, blah. And two things happened after that. One is I was really involved in church with my mom, just local non-denominational church. My dad was not involved with that at all. And so there was a little bit of a disconnect when it came to like biblical leadership, for example. Like I always sought that elsewhere because that wasn't coming from him. So I think two things happened. One is I sought mentors in other areas of life. And then I think to some level, he felt as though that was such an important part of my life that there were some key components that we just didn't connect on. And because of the brain surgery, he was so focused on just getting better that he wasn't as engaged, maybe. Now, here's what's really cool about the whole thing is our relationship's been fine. I mean, you know, we see each other, we are hug, I love you, how are you? But you know, it's all fine. But I use fine because it's like there is this deeper, you know, I think we all want this deeper connection. Anyways, I'm 39 now, and my dad was 39 when he had his brain surgery.
Okay.
And my dad got his master's degree, and for his master's, he wrote his thesis. It's like 400 pages about his brain surgery and the recovery. So I'm halfway through reading this book, and it's so rad to see how similar we are. And I'm discovering all these ways that we're really connected. And what was cool is we went out to dinner 2 weeks ago and started the conversation about like, wow, there's so many areas that we're really connected on. And so it's just, I mean, I'm 39 and it still matters. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I don't know if that's necessarily what you were asking, but that's where my relationship with my dad is now. But to simply answer your question, his playfulness is what I see showing up in me the most with my own kids.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
This is Ned Schaunt. Ned, tell us, last question is, if a dad is listening to this and he's struggling to connect with his kids, struggling to find his identity as a father, what is one piece of advice that you would help? And I know every person is different, every situation is different. What's one piece of advice that you would deliver to him to help pull him through?
Well, I'd say you're here right now, so you're already on the right path. So give yourself some grace to go, hey, I am on a journey. So it's all good. Like I'm here, I'm learning, I'm growing. An action item though is I would write out what it means to you to be a great dad. Like, you know, you could go as far as like writing your you know, whatever they read at your funeral. You could write that out, your eulogy. That's great, maybe a little sick. Or you could just write out. So like in my journal, at the beginning of my journal, I have it written, I call him the captain. And it is this like ideal version of myself. This is if I'm living to my highest and best, I want to live as the captain. And so I have this, like, literally, this is how the captain shows up. So like, here's one of the things: when he walks into a room, he's smiling, asking himself, how can he provide value? Not what do I need? Right. And so I read this to myself every morning, and then it gets rewritten in my next journal. Right. And so it always gets rewritten in my journal and revised and critiqued. And so I read it every day. And some days I'm pretty good at being the captain, and a lot of days I'm not. Right. But it's the domino of it, my hope. And I already know it's true. If 3 years from now, that version of the captain is going to be even deeper, because I'm going to push myself even further, and I'm going to look more and more like him than I do today. So write out what it means to be a great dad. What does he look like? And then start to become that man, and know your entire life is going to be in pursuit of that man. This ain't like, hey, next year. This is the fun part. Like, doing the work is the fun part.
Absolutely. The journey is really the process of enjoying the journey is what it's all about.
Yeah.
And awesome. Well, great conversation today, Ned. I really
Yeah,
appreciate
bro.
it.
Thank you.
How can people reach out to you and find you your content?
Yeah, so the Rebel and Create podcast, or the, the book, the journal, all that stuff is at rebelandcreate.com. The Adventure of Fatherhood children's book that's coming is going to be so amazing. You could go to adventureoffatherhood.com and pre-order a copy or two, get ready to give one away, start transform the world. And then yeah, I mean, I'm on Instagram at Ned Schaunt. I'm sort of on there, so like, if you want to see what I'm doing or say hi or connect or whatever, you can do that. I might not respond for 10 days because I'm not, living on Instagram these days.
Right on. Cool. Well, thank you so much, Ned, for taking your time, your valuable time to be a part of our show, and look forward to connecting next time.
Love it, bro. Thanks for the opportunity.